Welcome to the Regen Brands Podcast. This is a place for consumers, operators, and investors to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined by my co-host, AC, who's going to take us into the episode.
On this episode, we have Jessica Rubino and Douglas Brown from New Hope Network. Jessica serves as the Vice President of Content, and Douglas serves as a Senior Retail Reporter and Analyst. New Hope Network's purpose is to cultivate a prosperous, high-integrity CPG and retail ecosystem that creates health, joy, and justice for all people while regenerating the planet. New Hope Network is at the forefront of the natural, organic, and conscious products industry with solutions for the complete supply chain, including manufacturers, retailers, distributors, service providers, ingredient suppliers, media, and investors. New Hope Network offers a robust portfolio of content, events, data, research, and consultative services, and most of you are probably familiar with them for their seminal annual event, Natural Products Expo West, which Kyle and I broke down in episode 66. In this episode, we are talking all things Newtopia Now, which is New Hope's newest event designed for buyers to discover their next best-selling conscious products through facilitated connections, deepened relationships, and actionable and inspiring content. The unique floor plan at Newtopia Now is built around 4 neighborhoods, with one being Regenerate, showcasing brands building more regenerative supply chains and overall business models. We get a special sneak peek preview into the event overall, learn what retailers and regenerative brands can expect when attending Newtopia Now, and I asked both Jessica and Douglas for their thoughts on the hottest topics in the world of regenerative CPG, because I know y'all are tired of just hearing Kyle and I talk about them. Hopefully not, but it seemed cool to say. This was a super fun episode, y'all, and I'm looking forward to seeing many of you at Newtopia Now in August. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Regen Brands Podcast. Very excited today to have our friends Jessica and Douglas from New Hope joining us. So welcome, y'all.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, happy to have y'all here. We are here to talk about Newtopia Now, which I am very excited about and will be in attendance at and speaking at, and super fired up to kind of see the inaugural version of. But before we go there, like I shared with y'all kind of before the show, we probably have 2 paths into the Regen Brands Podcast, the kind of the CPG dominant path and the Regen dominant path. And everyone that comes from that CPG lane definitely knows who New Hope is and probably has heard about Newtopia Now, but maybe some of our Regen friends are less familiar. So Jessica, could you kind of give the audience just a little bit of overview on who New Hope is and what y'all do?
Yeah, definitely. No, it's funny because we were just talking about this the other day that not everyone knows who New Hope is and not everyone is familiar. Hey, newsflash, there might be some people. So timing is good to revisit. New Hope Network, we're probably most known for Natural Products Expo West, which is the largest trade show for the natural and organic product industry. And we do a range of other things. So we have publications, websites, we do research, all for the natural and organic product industry across categories, so food and beverage, dietary supplements, clean beauty. And we're really the B2B company that makes those connections that will help brands and retailers in the industry thrive. So everything from events to media to research is really what we do, all focused on B2B CPG industry things.
Love it. I'm so impressed that you just wrapped that up in that concise of a nice little bow after the previous calls we've been on, Jessica, where you've kind of expanded it for me and listed it all out in detail.
I am too. That was my own personal challenge to conquer of can I do that in 30 seconds? All right.
You're
off to
a hot start.
There we go.
You're off to a hot start. And we'd love the audience to also know each of y'all personally. So if you could share kind of full name, title, scope / role of what y'all do, and maybe history with the organization, I think that'd be great as well.
Yeah, Doug, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm Douglas Brown, a Senior Retail Reporter at New Hope and also Natural Foods merchandiser. And I've been here for about a year, a little more than a year now. But prior to this, I was a reporter for a long time. I covered the White House for 6 years, I
Wow.
covered crime across the state of New Mexico, covered tech. I did a million different things. But I covered food and agriculture for the Denver Post for a decade.
Hmm.
And then after all that, I ran a PR firm for a while. I'm back in the saddle with journalism now.
And Doug's amazing. He's been such an amazing part of our team and has really contributed. He'll talk more about his work around regen later on. But so I'm Jessica Rubino. I'm the Vice President of Content at New Hope. I have been at New Hope Network for 15 years. I celebrated my 15-year anniversary just recently, and even more than that because I started as an intern when I was in college at the
Wow.
University of Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm like the intern success story, one of New Hope. And I love it. So I get to oversee content across all of our things. So get to work with Jenna Fitch and our conference group on all things Expo, Newtopia, NBJ Summit, as well as all of our digital content and our NBJ brand. NBJ is focused on data for the nutrition industry, as well as all of our branded content and sponsored content. So all things content. And I just have the most wonderful team that works across all of our different products at New Hope and really connecting the industry through content, data, and insights.
Yeah.
15
it's
years.
amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
It's a
That's to be celebrated. And you do have an amazing team. I've enjoyed working with all of them in their various capacities. And I love that you're mentioning Doug's kind of work on the regen beat, so to speak. We will definitely talk about some of those stories and link them in the show notes. Fun question to round out the intros. What's y'all's favorite thing about the natural products industry for each of you?
I would say it's dynamism. I mean, when you go to Expo West, there, it's an industry where, you can't really just dream up an idea, working in your kitchen for tech or for a million other things. But a lot of the brands, it started in someone's kitchen. They went to a farmer's market. It picked up steam. And, they end up, making a CPG. I think that's thrilling. That's why it's such a big, diverse industry. I mean, a lot of it begins in a kitchen and people that just love food, which I'm a huge lover of food myself, was a food writer for a long time. So anyway, I just think that's super cool.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah, Doug's a really cool food. I don't even like the word foodie, but Doug, you are a food. I think it's annoying when people say foodie, but I love Doug, always knows things. He's way cooler than I am and knows about all the things. Mine is the people. I mean, I think the people I'm convinced that this industry attracts the most incredible, mission-driven, kind people in the world. And I think that probably underneath that is the purpose piece that brings all these people, is just a magnet for all these people doing really powerful and impactful things in the world. So that's why I plan to always be in this industry and have been with New Hope for so long, is because of the people. How about you, Anthony? What's yours?
I appreciate the prompt because I was going to say it anyway, but now I feel like even more obliged. Mine's a combination of both of those. We've kind of labeled, I think, what you're both talking about in our work as entrepreneurial activism. And we really think that regenerative brand founders and operators are the, 1% of the 1% entrepreneurial activists in this space right now. And so it's a deep empathy and a want to support those folks that we've launched the podcast and now various other things, some becoming more public very soon. So yeah, definitely a combination of both of those things, and eating good, healthy food all the time and supporting people trying to make those more available across the country is always a nice little added bonus, which is probably a good segue into talking about Newtopia, because at the end of the day, I think that's what all the content and events ultimately kind of lead to, right? When we're talking about what New Hope does. But Jessica,
I do have to say, Anthony, to say before you go into that, it's taking all of my self-control to not ask you follow-up questions because
when the role gets flipped and you become a podcast guest versus a podcast host, I feel you. This happens to me.
Oh,
too,
I know. I have to clutch the scene and be like, no, okay. Yes, let's talk Newtopia.
Yeah. Well, give folks just a lay of the land. This is a new event. Obviously, it replaces Expo East. What's the background? What's the goals? What's the overview there?
Yeah, so really exciting things are in the works. First of all, we're really excited to have you in Denver in August, and it's just such a great place for the natural products community to convene. We already have such a flourishing, incredible group here in the Denver Boulder area, with obviously Naturally Boulder being the first of the Naturally started in Boulder, New Hope Network being in Boulder. So now we have this great event in Denver, and many know, but if you don't, we sunsetted Natural Products Expo East last year. So 2023 was our last year of East, and it really gave us the opportunity to totally reimagine what we do with our second big trade show for the CPG industry. So enter Newtopia now. It is a completely reimagined event for the CPG industry. I would say at its core, the number one thing we want to do is be able to deepen relationships between buyers and brands, as well as brands and investors and brands and others in the industry. Expo West is our big tent event. Everyone is there. It's such a beautiful, vibrant gathering of the community. And we also know that people come out of it like, oh, I want to better get to know that connection, or I didn't really get a chance to meet with that buyer from Sprouts or Whole Foods or Thrive Market. And so we wanted to create a space that was more curated, more focused networking opportunities, matchmaking, some of those things that are really complementary to all of those big dynamic experiences that people have at Natural Products Expo West. So by coming up with a new event called Newtopia Now, we were able to do that along with just really fun experiential things. I mean, I think one of the most exciting things about events now is the opportunity to surprise and delight. And, when I go to an event, I want to be like, oh my gosh, remember when that really interesting, cool activation happened, or I was able to connect with this person over some great food. So those types of experiences are really front and center at Newtopia Now as well. So yeah, we're really looking forward to it. And I've loved just being in the community, talking with people about it and getting feedback. Feedback was really one of the most important things to us as we listened to our buyers. What is it that they wanted when they were discovering companies and getting to know brands, and how were brands feeling like they wanted to show up even outside of their booth? So for companies that are exhibiting at the show, they'll find that, it's not just about being there at your booth, but it's about telling your story and having a different activation, demoing your product, sampling, doing all these different things that allow you to deepen those relationships with buyers. So lots of exciting things.
Yeah, love that. Great overview. The word that stuck out to me was depth, and deepening those relationships, like you said a couple of times, which I think is sorely needed in all B2B type relationships, especially in the very digital universe we live in, where kind of COVID threw us into this no in-person interaction. But then the boomerang effect of that has been the expectations have been increased for those in-person interactions. So it's also kind of interesting timing have y'all have formulated this. I'm going to ask you a peek behind the curtain question, Jessica, of just like, how long have y'all been developing this concept? Because I'm assuming it was really exhilarating to, replace Expo East with something new, but also very scary. So like, how long has that timeline been, and what has that process been like?
Yeah, terrifying is accurate. We definitely have been thinking for a while about how do we continue to evolve Expo East, and really just our shows in general. You probably saw there are also some exciting changes that we're making to Expo West around show floor hours and different things. So, that's always top of mind. How do we listen to our community and make the necessary changes to have it be as good of an experience as possible on site and beyond? So that's an ongoing process. The work there has never done. For Expo East specifically, last year, we really wanted to try some new things at Expo East in Philadelphia to test them out and see what would be sticky with the community. And we were working on that for several months in advance of East. And then really we're like in the throes of launching this new event. So it all did happen pretty quickly. And, we were able to introduce the new concept at East last year, but between East and West was when we were really able to refine and get into the nitty gritty of it, and are still doing that work. The beautiful thing about that is we've been able to, as we roll out different concepts and ideas, get feedback and continue to make the necessary adjustments to have this really successful launch in August. So yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's a big challenge to launch a new event of this size, but we're really grateful that we have so many great partners to help us do it, and the early adopters, whether they be the brands, the retailers, or the other members of the community like yourself who are on board and helping us spread the word and make sure it's super successful. So it's fun.
Love that. And good on you for taking on that challenge. And look, everything's not going to go right the first year. We all know that, but it's all about, putting that best foot forward, doing as much as you can to prep, and then just learning and iterating from there. And I think the community supports that. This is a community that understands that very well conceptually. Douglas, what's the process been like for you to be involved in all that? And maybe what are you most excited about for Newtopia?
Well, I'm very excited for the Regenerate neighborhood for sure at Newtopia. But I'm excited for this notion of bringing the buyers and the brands closer together. We do that, of course, at Expo West. But this is really drilling down and focusing on that. And I think I've been interviewing people quite a bit, and they seem very excited about this, that we're being really intentional with Newtopia about bringing them together. So I'm pretty excited about that. The Regenerate neighborhood, I think the whole movement is just kind of thrilling. Yeah. And I love that we have a whole neighborhood here devoted to this. Really, it's still pretty novel movement. It's not like, organic's gigantic, or it's not like, I don't know, it's still kind of in its infancy, but here we're devoting a whole neighborhood to it. And I think it's pretty cool. And we have some cool events with chefs and farmers and brands. And there's all kinds of things going on that are going to be really exciting. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and we were definitely excited to see it chosen as one of the 4 neighborhoods. That was definitely exciting to us. And I think, good timing and made sense for where the industry's at with this novel and nascent concept, like you said, Douglas, but very complex concept as well. So maybe, Jessica, give us an overview on kind of the neighborhood concept and how that's come together, why Regenerate was selected as one, and kind of what's this whole neighborhood concept about?
Yeah, so one of the things that makes Newtopia now unique, there are several, I'll share a bit more detail, but one of them is the neighborhood concept. So what we wanted to do was create an environment on the show floor that was really interactive, that married booths with experiences and content. And we thought the best way to do that would be around thematic neighborhoods as opposed to the more traditional category-based pavilion style that people are used to. So in doing that, we were able to say, what are the areas of interest that are uniting people in the natural products and CPG community, and identify those that we felt were most important right now and most influential. So we have 4. The first one is in no particular order. Let me say, in no particular order. Thrive is our neighborhood that's dedicated to innovations in human health. So you'll find food and beverage, dietary supplements, kind of all categories represented there, but they're doing really interesting things around health innovation. Then we have Regenerate, which is all about regenerative business. So companies that are having a measurable positive impact on the environment, that are really looking at, how they can do good in the world from an environmental standpoint, as well as just regenerative business models. So new ways of doing business and looking at impact. Glow is our neighborhood that's dedicated to the future of wellness and clean beauty. So we're really excited to have that represented. And represent is a really important neighborhood that's all about a celebration of multicultural products and diverse founders. Wow. And really incredible companies showing up there as well. So that's the way that people will experience the show floor itself. We also understand that it's really important for buyers to have a more intuitive way to find products. So buyers will be able to do that through what we're calling the market. The market is off the show floor. We're hoping it's kind of the point of entry into the Newtopia Now experience. And it's an actual environment that's set up like a marketplace. And so every company that's exhibiting on the show floor also has a product in the market, and buyers can go in there, scan the product, see where those companies are on the show floor, and then go onto the show floor where within those neighborhoods they'll find booths, but also a stage that has content. You'll be on the stage, and others leading within the industry will be featured there, right there on the show floor. And then also experiences. We have a kitchen, we have a salon, all these really cool dynamic spaces on the show floor. So that is the neighborhood and then some.
That's amazing. I'm ready to go. Can we go tomorrow? It's right? The start of June. I can't wait till the end of August for this.
Yes, finally going to be 85 and sunny tomorrow in Denver after a huge hailstorm last night. So yeah, let's do it tomorrow.
There you go. Well, that's amazing. There's a lot of places we can go. There's a lot that y'all are working on. I can only imagine the operational complexity of handling all that, having been in the events business myself at one point. So I definitely empathize, but I also think it's a really important and fun undertaking because, it sounds like it's going to be a very new dynamic kind of event setting. For brands specifically, what should they expect that's different or unique about this experience versus other trade show event types experiences?
Yeah, there's a few things. And also thanks for recognizing, yes, it is very complex. There are lots of moving pieces and so many different aspects, but I appreciate the empathy for sure, because it's a lot. But yeah, there's a lot of really different ways that brands or different things that brands can expect. I would say one is very operational, and that's that buying a booth comes with the booth package, the furniture package. So it's not something that I'm a content person, so I'm not oh wow, booth furniture. But when you really think about it, that's a big deal. And that kind of speaks to this bigger vision for it, which is that a company, we want to make it really easy for them to actually exhibit so that they can get there and put that energy into building those relationships and building those connections. So the other big difference is that we've crafted most of our packages in a way where a company is buying a booth, but also participating in some sort of activation. So that activation may be something called a stoop talk, where they're having an interview with a host in front of buyers to talk about what's behind their company and behind their brand. Or it may be a really cool cooking demo opportunity in our kitchen space, or it may be a demo of their beauty products in our salon. So every company is expected to show up and not just be, staffing their booth, but really be telling the story of their products and connecting in that different type of way with buyers, investors, others. So that's why we crafted everything in the way that we did. We also really wanted it to just overall be really accessible. Our buyers are very excited to connect with a lot of emerging brands. They're also looking forward to, being able to have more time with some of their more established partners. So I would say the expectation is a little bit different for this trade show of we want everyone to come and not be sort of anonymous, but to really show up and show up in a way that feels very intentional. So I think that's kind of a big difference. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, brands can expect to also have their product in the market and then also participate in matchmaking. I didn't talk that much about that, but everyone who attends the event, our buyers are participating in a type of matchmaking, whether it be our digital matchmaking program or our concierge matchmaking program. And so brands can really expect to be having a lot of those one-on-one meetings through our matchmaking. one more thing. So I'm not doing so good with the concise answers after my first
you
one.
got a lot to cover. I think you're doing great, honestly. I think you're doing great.
Yeah,
amazing.
I'm actually
I hope you enjoyed that 30-second. I hope you enjoyed that 30-second response from. So final thing is just the curation of the networking experiences. So in addition to matchmaking, we have a lot of really focused networking opportunities. We have dine-arounds. Each neighborhood has its own dine-around where we bought out really cool restaurants throughout Denver. And those will be us curating the invite list. So being like, this retailer and this investor should really meet these brands and getting people together in that way. Yeah. So lots of things like that. So I think that big picture, it's like brands can expect to have a lot of the right meetings at the right times and some of those really important conversations. And, you had mentioned the importance of connection, and we've both been talking about that, deepen relationships. And I think just partnerships overall, like we want this to set the stage for the types of partnerships that can advance the mission of regenerative, advance the mission of human health initiatives. And so this environment is kind of the perfect place to set the table for and set the stage for all of that.
Yeah, I appreciated the length of that response and the depth and the nuance because it was needed. And to me, like the theme that's coming out of that I'm hearing, Jessica, is like bringing the experience back into these products, into this category, like making it very experiential, which I think if you look at the history of natural and organic products, it started off as super experiential, kind of a niche thing, and it's gotten more commoditized over time, which is great because it's become more accessible and it's become more scaled. But we've seen some of those retailers get less creative with their merchandising. We've seen a lot more products of the same type, proliferate in the marketplace. So how do we kind of bring some more of that uniqueness, that experience into the experience, for lack of a better way to say it? And we talk about this a lot with the regenerative brands that are on this podcast. Most of them are, merchandise in center store, which you feel you are limited in how you can express your product and its attributes in center store sometimes versus fresh. And I actually think that's a limiting belief that we don't have to accept. And so trying to bring that kind of energy into this assortment, I think is really, really cool. And that's how we're going to get people to discover these products, try these products, fall in love with these products. So I just love that kind of ethos underpins all of that you just mentioned.
That's such a great takeaway. Thank you, Anthony, for kind of extracting that from all the words that I put out to this, because it's so spot on, and it's actually come up a lot. Like I had a conversation with Angela Bozo from Infra, who's been a really great partner for this, and she'll be doing a session on innovation and merchandising. But one of the things that she and I were talking about is like just that even how we are talking about this event, it's kind of like merchandising people and experiences and products and ideas and getting all the right people together and infusing some of that energy and excitement back into the industry and the things that really built this natural and organic product industry of like being super innovative, creative, resourceful, and, challenging the status quo. So I think a lot of those core values that the industry is built on are coming back through Newtopia now, and a lot of the other work happening throughout the CPG space right now. So yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I love that. Douglas, you mentioned very excited about the Regenerate neighborhood. You mentioned some specific things, but want to give you a moment to maybe elaborate on some things we haven't covered or other things that you're really excited about when it comes to Regenerate.
Yeah, sure. We have, let's see. There's the one event that's going to be quite a bit of fun. Is we've got Chef Eric Skokin. He's a chef and farmer. He runs a Black Cat Organic Farm. Yeah, it's the biggest farm table operation in the United States. Just won a Michelin Green Star, which is it's hard to get a Michelin star to begin with, and this one goes beyond. It's restaurants that are sort of really committed to sustainability. He'll be on stage. So he's been doing this for 15 years, and he's been doing regenerative farming with incorporating livestock, and he's also USDA organic. So we're going to have him on stage with Kelly Whitaker, another He's a well-known chef in Colorado. He also won, I think,
Nice.
actually 2 Michelin Green Stars last year. And both Eric and Kelly were very involved in launching what's called the Colorado Grain Chain.
Yeah.
And that's really leading, sort of finding markets for local, at least Colorado, mostly, grain farmers. And so Kelly has a bakery and a bunch of restaurants, and he turns to local regen farmers to get a lot of his wheat and other grains. And same with Eric. And then on the same panel, those two also, in addition, they're both are well known for their very keen palates. So they're going to also talk about, Eric. I've known Eric I used to write about him before I was with the Denver Post. He farms for flavor. So to him, he's very committed to the environment, everything else. But if it didn't taste good, if it didn't taste better, probably he wouldn't do it. But both Kelly and Eric will talk about, in addition to finding markets for regen farms, they'll talk about it. It just tastes better. It's just better. It's better texture, better flavor, the rest of it. And then we'll get Claudia Bouvier. She's the co-founder of Pastificio, which is a Colorado, or actually based in Boulder, pasta company. And Claudia also is part of Colorado Grain Chain. And so a lot of her products, it's all heirloom grains in her products, but a lot of her products, she gets her grains locally. And so as much as she can. And she's now Pastificio is nationwide. So she'll cover the CPG angle. And in the end, it'll be like this group of people talking about, support regenerative farmers. It's not like it's relatively easy to support a soybean or a corn farmer in that conventional in Iowa, because there's markets there. There's a million markets there. But to support, a small region, she needs the restaurants, she needs the CPG, she needs the farmers markets, she needs all of it. And so I think it's going to be a fun panel where we have these 3 people up there talking about how they have really, leveraged and worked with local regen movement to create their businesses. And I think that's really cool.
Just for the listeners, I promise I did not prep or prompt Doug to give the Regen Brands manifesto on how we need to create better markets for regenerative agriculture, but he just did unprompted. So thank you, Doug. I appreciate that. And that's what we're all about. I know like Moxie Bread and Mad Ag and some other folks are also involved in the Colorado Grain Chain. So I think that's a great group, of kind of co-conspirators to get involved. And it actually reprompted something I wanted to say earlier too, of I can speak for myself where I feel as though the Denver Boulder OG natural community has adopted me, in my efforts and people I've kind of brought into this. And so I think it's just really cool that the event's happening there, because I certainly, in tech in Silicon Valley, they talk about the PayPal mafia that has gone on from PayPal to start all these other companies that are unicorns and all this stuff. And I see the OG Boulder Denver crew is a similar kind of things in natural foods. And there's so many people I could list off that have been so formative and helpful, to me personally and to many others. And so I love that connection just sparked that thought in my head again. It's just the perfect place for this event for sure.
We think so.
Yeah.
No, and I know you have some deep roots here, Anthony, and I think what Doug outlined, like bringing some key members of the community, and then of course bringing, as in the local community, and being able to bridge the gap between the culinary world and the CPG community and the agriculture world. So that's a really exciting aspect of Regenerate. And then I'm also really excited to bring the voices of key retailers to the stage. That's something that we wanted to do a lot more of at Newtopia now. So we're doing that through something we call our buyer side chats. We've done some of these virtually. They've been so successful. But of course, brands and really anyone doing business in CPG wants to hear from retailers. What are they looking for? How do they make decisions? How are they merchandising? How are they educating their customers? And so in the Regenerate neighborhood, we're really excited to have the Sprouts Forager team there. They're going to be on the stage talking about what they look for and specifically some of their work in the regenerative space. And then throughout other neighborhoods, we have Thrive Market, Whole Foods, a range of really awesome retailers that are doing great work, because I think it's so important for us to all, you talked about empathizing with the kind of event operations experience, but just that idea of empathy is so important in the CPG space. Like brands have to be listening to retailers, not just trying to get their products into those retail environments and vice versa. And of course, when you introduce the agriculture piece into all of this, like we need to better understand each other, the needs, the challenges, the opportunities in order to effectively partner and advance our collective mission. So buyer side chats, I think, are one really unique way to do that and a really important part of the regenerative conversation too.
Yeah, I love that. And that's becoming a recurring theme on the podcast as well, is like we think we have a lot of momentum in regen in terms of the farmers actually and the brands and kind of this claims universe that's developing. So we're getting a proliferation of products with, third-party validated claims to some degree, but there's kind of this conversation that still hasn't happened with distributors and retailers, where there might be a way we need to commercialize these differently, or there might be a way we need to collaborate in how they're commercialized differently. And so establishing more of that two-way communication, and also kind of open kimono two-way communication, where it's like, hey, we're making these decisions because of this reason. Okay, on this side, we're making these decisions based on this reason. How can we do it differently? How can we do it better? I think that's key. And for regenerative, marketing claims specifically, I know I'm very excited about our session, not to plug it too hard, but it's really about not just regenerative, but also organic and some other, eco claims overall. How do we give retailers more programmatic tools to go educate consumers and drive purchase with these claims? Because in regen specifically, we've reached phase one where we've gotten to critical mass in terms of the products that are being commercialized, but we are kind of now just getting into the frontier of, okay, how do we actually translate all that work into more commercial value in a programmatic way where that entire engine is humming together? So I'm really excited about all conversations and connections around that topic.
Yeah, well, you're the best possible person to lead that discussion. And I think we should be, tooting your horn for that session, because I think it's going to be one of the most powerful. I mean, we talk to retailers all the time who are asking those questions of like, how do we do this? Like, how do we educate our customers? We care about this and our brand partners care about this, but what does it look like in the aisle? And so to really start building that understanding and recognize like the work is not done when the product makes it onto the store shelf. Like that's when it's just getting started. And so for retailers to really dig in and see some case studies and understand some examples of how it can come to life in their stores, that's so important. And there's no single right way to do it, but we need to start developing some industry-wide standards of how we educate and how we talk about these issues in the stores. So yeah, I'm really excited for you to be driving that.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, and along those lines, I interviewed PCC Markets in the past couple of weeks, and they're being very methodical about how they're going to go about sort of, first of all, setting regenerative standards, and then how to market and message it. So they had a convening, I think, in February where they invited a lot of people to Seattle to sort of have a big discussion. And they told me it's going to take that. They won't be done with this until I think in the fall. They'll finally sort of say, look, there's a lot of different certifications out there. There's brands that have those certifications and use the word regenerative. We as a store want to figure out, what are our standards? What to us means regenerative? What are the different things that fit into the regen puzzle? And then in addition, on top of that, okay, we get that. How are we going to educate consumers about what this means and why it matters?
Yeah. It's certainly a wild landscape at the moment. And I think it's exactly where it needs to be, as frustrating as that can appear at times or feel at times, but it is rather early innings in this whole thing. And what I think we all are trying to avoid is it going the way of sustainable or all natural, where it kind of just becomes like a boilerplate thing that doesn't mean a ton, because that term clearly has all of this potential that is so radically different. But I think when you think about in trade, we all understand that. We love that nuance. We love that complexity. But if you look at historical claims in CPG, they need to be simple and binary and really easy to communicate to consumers. And so what's that through line that we're going to create, to actually translate it? I'm curious, kind of just y'all are covering many things. So you're not like me where it's all regen all the time. It's just one of the many things that are top of mind for y'all. But what are you seeing in terms of regenerative claims and those sourcing commitments? And like, how do you think that's going to continue to develop in the landscape?
You know, I wish I had.
It's a hard ass question, Doug.
That's a hard ass question.
So
and I wish I had a hard ass crystal ball.
Yeah, I'm like, Doug, you take that one.
Yeah,
I mean, sidestep that one like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix.
Yeah, that's right.
Dogs did start barking, so I'm gonna go now.
But I liked you talking to me. Yeah, you're right. Sustainable is a meaningless word. And it's also a much weaker. I mean, if we just sustain the current situation with agriculture, we lose, Yeah. So, and I'm glad it never got defined and really has lost its meaning, because regenerative actually means, it's all about enlivening the soil. It's bringing life back, biodiversity, all these things. But I think a big effort right now is California. The state of California is in an effort to define regenerative, and I don't think I have no idea what they're going to end up doing, but they're going to make up their own definition. I don't think it's going to say ROA is regen or regen. These are different certifications. I don't think they're going to say this is what it is. They're going to have their own definition. Yeah. And I think that's going to be because what California does tends to sort of echo throughout the rest of the country. I think it's a very important effort. I think we're still in the public sort of comment section of that effort. And there's a lot of competing forces there, whether some think it should be built, the foundation is organic, others say not at all. And I guess I have no idea where that's going to go, but we do need to figure something. I do think, especially when brands use the word the way they use sustainability and there's no certification, and in a way, outside of the California effort, that's almost the onus is almost on retailers to sort of say, look, if you're going to be in our store and you're going to say regenerative, there are certain standards that we abide by. You can't just willy-nilly use this word. We have regenerative oil and gas drilling. I mean, Yeah. So anyway, but again, no crystal ball. I don't know where it's going to go. It is a wilderness. USDA, when USDA zeroed in on organic, they at least did define it. There's only one organic out there. I don't think it's going to happen with regen, but it will be important that over the next however long, we do sort of come to some consensus about what it broadly means.
Yeah, we certainly need more unification. How we get there will be really interesting to see and watch unfold. The interesting on the CDFA defining is they're really defining it for the definition in terms of awarding money to support specific practice adoption, from what I understand. So it's really like an on-the-ground application definition. So how is that going to translate to a packaged food product marketing claim? How do those two interact? They haven't clearly defined that, and we really don't know how that domino affects that latter domino, because that's the world that we all live in more down here. Right. And it's kind of funny to break it down like that, because that's honestly what all the discourse and divisiveness is currently stemming from, which is kind of how the translation of what it is on the land is ending up on pack, right? Or in sourcing
For
claims.
Sure.
And there's this really hard kind of fine line between, hey, it does need to be third-party validated and certifications have value and are really, really meaningful. And I have some very specific examples of people that, from a philosophical perspective or from an operational cost or complexity perspective, they don't feel the need to be certified, and I don't feel like they should be mandated to be certified. So it's this weird catch-22 where we have to come up with systems that, in our hyper-masculine Western binary world, you can put into something like that. But also we have to leave some nuance and some complexity for improvement to actually occur, and kind of the journey to be alive and kind of self-determining. So it's hard.
Yeah,
I don't know how we figure it out.
And I completely agree with what you just said, Anthony and Doug. Like, I think that there's a few things, that obviously, like, I think that third-party validation is really important on a lot of levels. And there's so much nuance here that I think figuring out a way to dissolve some of the infighting that's just creating barriers, any progress. But I also think, I love what you said, Doug, about retailers' role in all of this, of creating those standards and barriers to entry. I think the retailer's role as gatekeeper is so important, especially in these emerging and developing areas, whether it be regenerative or clean beauty. We see it in a lot of different spaces, but retailers have such an important role to play there. And the only other thing that I wanted to add is just we do have to also be aware of how consumers are changing. One of the interesting things that we found through our Gen Z research is that certifications outside of organic, very important to Gen Z consumers, but certifications aren't really resonating. And I'm not saying like don't pursue the certifications, but we have to kind of peel back the layers and say, well, why is that? What are people, if they're not necessarily equating certifications with authenticity, then what does indicate a degree of authenticity? And I think the transparency, the story, all those things that sometimes can be a little bit harder to quantify and define are actually having some of the greatest impact on consumer decision making, especially this like younger generation of consumers. So I just want to throw that out there as like food for thought of how are people making decisions now, and how can we do, you know, what we believe is right while also do what is best supporting their journey to more kind of conscious decision making.
Yeah, and underpins even more empathy, another empathy conversation for retailers and brands, because they're in a weird catch-22 where it's like the wallets that are being spent on food today, that's not showing up, but we all know those things are coming. So when are we going to get to the tipping point where we're going to shift? Because right now certifications do move the needle and the people buying the products really do care about them. But maybe the next generation's not, but they are not the ones spending a lot of the money yet. And so it's like you're in this really odd spot where you kind of have to decide, am I playing the puck on the ice as it lies today, or am I skating kind of down to it to where it's going to go? We're kind of trying to do both. I didn't play hockey. I don't know why I'm in a hockey mode today in my brain, but that's the analogy that's sticking. You know, I do want to say last thing, just kind of on the claims validation landscape, which is it is the wild, wild west. We have many, many third-party certifications, and we have people that are not using one of those certifiers. But in the natural channel specifically, there is almost next to zero, you know, non-third-party validated claims, because these retailers like Whole Foods, Natural Grocers, Thrive Market, they are making people validate, you know, those claims from a regenerative perspective to their standards, folks, even if they aren't third-party certified. So I do think we actually have done a relatively decent job as an industry kind of holding the line, even though it's very messy. And I think people do forget that even your non-third-party certified claims are still third-party validated a lot of the times by a very robust process by a retailer.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. In fact, I was talking with Jimbo's, a buyer at Jimbo's, maybe just a few weeks ago. And he said, look, you know, we love it. If it's certification, it makes it easier. But there's a lot of brands that they don't have the resources or whatever. We like to bring them in if we can, but we have to interview them. We have to look closely at their story, you know. But we, as the retailer, will do the work to sort of say, okay, this one doesn't have a certification, but you know, we trust. We've done the work. We understand what they're doing is actually in the right direction. So the retailers are key for all of this.
For sure.
Doug, you didn't talk, and I know we're probably getting ready to move on, and you can cut this, Anthony, if you want to.
Let it rip. Come on, Jessica.
Well, Doug's been covering a lot. I'm curious your thoughts on this, Anthony, but just more of the work to identify the nutritional aspects of regenerative. And I think that's like a message that has a ton of potential. Like the more we can prove that regenerative ingredients and products are more nutrient dense and people can tie it directly back to their personal health, the more we're going to move the needle. So I think a lot of that work is really exciting and comes much more down to the quantifying of the nutrients in the products and ingredients as opposed to the third-party validation piece that we're talking about. So just want to throw that out there if we're talking about the next frontier of regenerative and what it looks like.
Yeah, for sure. That the science is still nascent on that, but it's happening, and that, you know, regenerative does it's sort of like, I mean, organic had the, you know, it's very complex to get certification. However, consumers boiled it down to no chemical is better for me, I'm going to buy it. Regen doesn't necessarily have that. Doesn't really have that. Doesn't have that. At least that's a strong kind of sell like that. But this nutrient density piece might give that better for me kind of angle to regen.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts. You summed it up there really well, Douglas. I think, that the technology is not there yet, and it's not cheap enough there yet to really allow us to do the amount of data collection and rigor needed to make it really easy to make these claims. The Nutrient Density Alliance just put out a recent white paper where they cover all this in depth. So we will link
Good
that
stuff.
in the show notes and people can check that out. And I'm really torn on the comp you just gave, and I was going to go there. So happy you brought it up, which is organic has become just this binary chemical free versus not, when it really was supposed to be something much more than that. And so is there power in learning from that and saying regenerative has to do that because that's just the paradigm we sit in when you're translating claims to a consumer? Or is it like, hey, let's make sure we don't do that because we're going to lose, all this nuance and beauty that it should entail. And I don't know what the answer is to that. I think what we talk about ad nausea on the show and with brands is, hey, regenerative is not a primary purchasing driver. You can have the best regenerative operation ever. You can have it fully certified. It can be front and center on pack, but like the vast, vast majority of consumers are still not going to buy your product because of that. They're going to buy because of the other primary things that always win: taste, it looks cool, price, it has an awesome health and wellness benefit. And so I think nutrient density allows you to play that game of a primary purchasing driver with the health and wellness benefit potentially, but ultimately you have to win by translating regenerative into one of those things and then using it as a loyalty and retention tool on the back end, to kind of keep people into it and show them that's why you're winning with one of those primary things. I'm also very fresh off of a really, really good episode with Ali O'Brien, who's the VP of marketing at Harmless Harvest. And they're now all regenerative organic certified, coconut supply chain. And she's really, and her team have really had to think long and hard about how they build this into their claims architecture, how they put it on packaging. And she's classically trained, total badass marketing CPG through and through. So that was a super illuminating conversation around kind of how do we think through some of these things conceptually, start activating them tactically in the marketplace, learning from that and iterating from there.
Yeah, and to your point about whether the organic, again, it's a complex system. However, it got boiled down to really one thing.
Yeah.
And should regen do the same thing or do something? Should it try to find a better for me angle or do all of it? And I was talking to Paul Lightfoot at Patagonia Provisions, and I said I presented a question to him saying, "Well, regen is very complex. It must be hard to sell." His response was like, "That's the advantage." He said, "That's great. We're full of rich storytelling possibilities. We can really lean into people's heartstrings and why this matters. And that's the beauty. I'm so glad it's complex because that gives us a lot of opportunity to tell the story."
Yeah. And it's going to be unique based on the product and the commodity too, which is a whole nother piece we haven't even touched on, which is like for Patagonia to talk about their beer, that's going to be different than Simply talks about their lupini beans, and Alex Ice Cream talks about ice cream, and Good Sam talks about chocolate. Like those are going to be different stories, but they're all regenerative, So what does that also look like too is interesting.
You just listed some of my favorite brands there too.
What was that?
I was just saying that Anthony listed some of my favorite regenerative brands in that last sentence. I'm like, those are all my faves.
I was going to skip this question because I don't want to ask y'all to play favorites, but because people make me do it all the time, I'm going to ask both of you, what is your favorite regenerative product that you use, or have used?
Well, I'm going to say it's not a single product, but for me, Lundberg rice. Lundberg has really, they are leaning heavily into regen. Yeah. And I've been buying Lundberg rice for decades, but I love that there's so many. You go into Whole Foods or wherever, and there's going to be a lot of Lundberg. There's going to be a bunch of it's going to be, I know their goal, I think it's by next year. It's sometime relatively soon. They want everything to be regen. Mm-hmm. And so I love that brand. I love that product.
Yeah, no, I think this is the portion when we all start talking over each other because we get really excited about all the companies and what so we're like, yes, I love Lundberg. I'm a big fan of what Ancient Nutrition is doing because I think it's really important to have this conversation in different categories, whether it be in supplements or beauty in addition to food and beverage. So I'm a big fan of their work. I love Simply. So I've been eating lupini beans since I was like a little girl.
Really?
Yes. And then I'm like, the lupini bean. It's everywhere and our next to judging it. But I think to really understand that ingredient and just what Simply's done with supply chain work is so amazing. But So I love what they're doing. And yeah, there's a lot of really great ones. And of course, Good Sam. And I am always a fan of just seeing powerful women leaders driving change across supply chain and CPG work. So yeah, there's lots of good ones. Of course, Dr. Bronner is a pioneer in all this work as well. So yeah.
Anthony, what about you?
Jessica sounds like me answering the question. I like say one and then I'm like, I got to say 7 more. And
Yeah,
then I get to all 75 episodes of the podcast. And I'm like, okay, I'm finally done.
Yes.
You know, for me, there's definitely a couple favorites. I'm investors in their businesses, so it's hard to not show favoritism towards them, but I acknowledge that bias. But I mean, my dad eats more ice cream than anyone you've ever met. And so naturally I have a sweet tooth and I love ice cream. And Alex Ice Cream is it for me. Like if you put a gun to my head and you said, hey, you have to get rid of all your regenerative products besides one, it'd be hard for me to give up grass-fed, grass-finished regenerative beef of all brands, but Alex Ice Cream would be the number one. And I will eat literally a whole pint a night. It is insane. I don't know how I'm not, 400 pounds, but I'm just crushing Alex Ice Cream at an incredible rate.
It's so good. You should have seen us judging that during the Nexty Awards. We're all like, you say all these, what you think are these eloquent things about these products and these really insightful things that we're like, for that, we're like, it's just so good.
Yeah. Totally.
Well, that's the power of brands and products to translate regenerative into consumer awareness, which is like, once again, some people are going to buy it because it's regenerative and probably more people will buy it because it's A2, but most people are going to buy it because it's just damn good ice cream. And the more products we have like that are like that and regenerative, this thing is going to win in the long term because of that.
The greatest way to scale your impact as a mission-driven brand is to have an awesome brand with an exceptional product, and then people will love it. I completely agree, and we're seeing so many of those in the regenerative space. So that's so cool to see that evolution.
Yeah. This has been a super fun conversation, y'all. Thank you so much for spending the time with me. So excited for Newtopia now, and just curious kind of any last minute closing thoughts on Newtopia or regenerative or anything else we've talked about? And Douglas, maybe we start with you.
Sure. One thing, we've talked a fair bit about how to sell the regen idea. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned Lundberg before as one of my favorite brands. And I do want to mention that Lundberg has done a fantastic job of marketing what they do. They have a whole campaign called Ducking Good Rice.
Yeah.
And, the Lundberg rice regen story is unique. They don't depend on livestock to become regenerative for their rice paddies. It all has to do with waterfowl. And so they've been saving, I think it's 30,000 duck eggs a year and getting them hatched and letting these ducks loose and then preserving habitat for ducks. And that has become the centerpiece of their marketing campaign. And they have ducks people dressed like ducks walking around Times Square. They've got full page ads in the New York Times, a lot of stuff tied to Earth Day. They've done so much. And Britta Lundberg, who sort of runs the marketing there, she said, look, we had a unique little niche, and we realized this is how we can tell the regen story very colorfully. Yeah. And she said, every regen brand has the same kind of thing. Just find out what it is that you're doing that's kind of colorful and unique and tells your story, and just run with it. And I thought that was great advice on Britta's part.
Yeah, the episode with her and Bryce was so fun, and they're amazing people. And, that's really a critical thing that's going to happen with them now having like 70 plus SKUs with ROC certification on it, and then putting the resources into that big marketing campaign that you're talking about, Douglas, because I think that's like the very first brand of really significant scale that has crazy ACV in the natural channel and MULO that's going to have kind of this proliferation of that thing showing up in pack in front of consumers. So the entire community, and ROC specifically, that brand, that community of brands, will learn a lot from that, and just so appreciate their trailblazing efforts there, and great call out. Jessica, anything on your side as we wrap up?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having us. This has been
welcome.
Really great and fun. And yeah, I think the big thing, just taking a step back a little bit, big picture, like I'm seeing so many kind of similarities between this conversation we're having around regenerative and what we're trying to do collectively through Newtopia. I think this idea of interconnectedness keeps coming up, and how important it is to tackle these big issues together to co-create the future we want to see. And just, of course, going back to the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And so I'm really excited to see how we can take on some of these big issues, not just at Newtopia now, but as an industry together moving forward, a conscious products industry that's trying to do good in the world. So I think this is a great microcosm of kind of all the things that we're trying to achieve as a CPG industry. And I'm really can't wait to see you at Newtopia now. And I want this conversation to, of course, we could go on and on this. So we'll have lots more opportunities at Newtopia now in Denver.
Yeah, love that. And for folks that are really keen to check out Newtopia, is it just newtopianow.com is the website?
Yes, newtopianow.com. And then we'll have tons of content leading up to the event on newhope.com, on our socials. Be sure to like all of our pages, Newtopia Now. And also we have a podcast, The Naturalist, and we have lots of great episodes coming up with interviews with people, including you, coming up pretty soon, who will be at Newtopia Now. So lots of ways to stay connected in the months leading up to the event.
Amazing. Well, thanks y'all so much for joining us. This has been super fun. Looking forward to being in Denver in August, and hopefully we'll see a bunch of people there that are listening to this episode.
Thank you, Anthony. You do a great job.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all.
For show notes, episode transcripts, and more information on our guests and what we discuss on the show, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also find our Regen Recaps on the website. Regen Recaps take less than 5 minutes to read and cover all the key points of the full hour-long conversations. You can check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands Podcast, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe to future episodes, and share the show with your friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Regen Brands Podcast, brought to you by the Regen Coalition and Outlaw Ventures. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.